First and foremost, what happened in Iowa was there was a Des Moines Register poll. It's the most significant poll in Iowa. It definitely changes people's minds leading up to Iowa. That poll was yeeted last second.
On Monday, Iowans will kick off the nation's first voting contest. The results can set the tone for the rest of the 2020 race. But tradition was upended Saturday when the Des Moines Register, CNN, and its polling partner announced the, quote, heart-wrenching decision not to release the final installment of its presidential preference poll. It comes after concerns the results may have been compromised. The Register has published the Iowa poll for more than 70 years, and it is considered to be the gold standard of political polling.
CNN had an hour-long coverage dedicated to the poll, and they had to drop that coverage. You might ask why. Why did they drop this incredibly important coverage for the DMR poll, the Des Moines Register poll, one of the most accurate polls in all of politics for determining who will win Iowa? Well, it was because Pete Buttigieg's campaign complained. They called the manager on the Iowa poll, and they called the manager on CNN, and they called the manager on the Des Moines Register. And guess what happened? The manager said, of course, sir, of course we will just drop this and no longer talk about it. The results still leaked, of course, obviously. Everyone in media had access to the numbers. We still talked about them. Bernie Sanders at 22% was in the top contender. Elizabeth Warren was in second place, running a tight race behind Bernie Sanders, and Pete Buttigieg in third place. And Joe Biden was nowhere to be found. You know, that was pretty reflective of what happened, except credit where credit is due. Rat Boy's team actually did do well, especially in the second wave in the Iowa caucuses, where people that did not make the 15% viability threshold ended up voting for Pete Buttigieg and his rat ways. I think that was good. He did well. And oh, by the way, just before I forget, the reason why the DMR poll was yeeted apparently was because one person that was asked about all the candidates did not hear Pete Buttigieg. And in the second round, when the polling person brought it up again, they said his last name wrong.
The campaign of Pete Buttigieg, however, raised a complaint to the poll when they said that a person surveying folks left Pete Buttigieg off of one of the samples. And so that had caused the pollsters to really have to reevaluate the legitimacy of this poll.
This was the reason why the DMR poll was yeeted. That was the one thing where you were like, what? That's kind of weird. That's kind of sus that this is happening. Who cares? Okay, whatever. Moving on. And then the Iowa caucuses happened. People filled the rooms in Iowa. There was round-the-clock coverage of it. Yours truly covered this as well. And I'm not going to get too far into the application that the DNC was using, even though plenty of journalistic outlets in mainstream media that most of you who are going to scream conspiracy theory trust. Plenty of those outlets were ringing the alarm bells about this DNC application that was being used because it was a weird last-second shadowy application that they decided to take advantage of, that they decided to use. No one knew who had made the application. No one knew if it was secure or not. And the DNC refused to answer these questions when plenty of journalists were asking these questions. This was a couple weeks before Iowa. So Iowa time comes around. You know, the caucuses are happening. Rooms are being filled. Joe Biden supporters are finally realizing that mainstream media support for Joe Biden is very different than like actual support for Joe Biden in Iowa.
Frankly, a smaller number so far. There's about 25 minutes until we're going to get a total sense of the number.
Why?
Which
Show
means
the Bernie
we'll
one.
get a sense of how many people need to be in each camp to be viable. This is also a smaller group, but Hardy. That's
Andrew Yang has
Yang's
more
group
people
here.
than Bernie said. Andrew Yang has more people than Joe Biden, dude.
A supporter for Tom Steyer here in Polk County. This is probably so.
Yang gangers are participating in democracy for the first time in their lives because they're 14 years old and finding out that they are not eligible to vote. Is this for real? A gang of Yang Gang supporters just showed up at a Iowa satellite, Iowa caucus. None of them are from Iowa. Wait, did they think you can do that? You know that's fraud, right? Like you can't caucus if you're out of state, homie. What? Okay, to be fair, they probably didn't know that you're also not allowed to vote unless you're over the age of 18, which most Yang gangers are not. Yang gangers are also finding out that they're not eligible to vote if they don't live in Iowa, in Iowa caucuses. So this is like a cool experience for everybody. There's that one crank that loves Tulsi Gabbard in every caucus that has been out in public for the first time. You know what I mean? They left their mother's basement. These sorts of things are happening all around. It's a beautiful day. So what happens that night, halfway through the process? All of a sudden, the DNC and the Iowa Democratic Party decide we got to hold off on these results. And everyone was like, wait a minute, what's going on?
Statement we're getting from the Iowa Dem says we're doing our quality control checks, making sure the numbers are accurate. People are still caucusing. We're working to report results soon. But as we reported earlier today, there was a lot of issues with caucus chairs downloading the app that was going to report the results from these caucus sites around the state.
This is kind of weird. Bernie's surging a little bit right now. We don't know what's happening. Bernie's definitely winning in the first round in the popular vote, and in the second round of the popular vote, even after the realignment, he has a significant lead on everybody. What the hell is going on? This is not what the mainstream media expected. They were already gearing up for this moment. They were writing articles about how Iowa is nonsense, and no one should even pay attention to Iowa. It's just a bunch of white farmers. Who cares? So we find out that the process has been halted, and the count has been halted for now because, drumroll please, the application that the DNC was using to record all the votes is broken.
The delay in results from Iowa's first-in-the-nation caucuses was due in part to problems with a mobile app used to report figures to the state party. First, some precinct leaders had trouble downloading or logging into the app. Then, officials realized the process for transmitting data was only showing partial results.
People are reporting that the application resets itself if you don't have your finger on it at all times. Some people are having a hard time logging onto the application. The application is just broken. Where does that leave us with? I mean, this is something that they could manually calculate, right? They could just manually calculate the votes. After all, caucuses are very difficult to rig. You can't really rig a caucus. People are literally there. And there are precinct captains that are there exclusively to ensure that this process is done correctly. So what happens? Well, they stop the process entirely, and then they say, "Hey, we'll get back to you in 24 hours. Hopefully, we'll have some numbers by then." Luckily, Bernie Sanders, unlike the neoliberal morons, had a working application. So now we're in the next day. We don't know what's going to happen. That night, Pete Buttigieg comes out in his rat ways and announces that he is clearly the winner.
By all indications, we are going on to New Hampshire victorious.
He just says, I'm the winner. Nah, boo-boo. I am the winner of the Iowa caucus. I won. Iowa is no longer homophobic. We defeated homophobia. We defeated rat phobia. That was a big one, too. So, and then he, of course, went full-fledged into New Hampshire money raising. Because he doesn't have a lot of money left in his campaign because he front-loaded it on Iowa, which was a bet that definitely paid off. Even without all of the DNC manipulation, even without all the media manipulation of the results and the slow rollout that I'm going to get to, Pete did really well. He definitely outperformed expectations. He outperformed polls, and he captured a lot of second round moderates. That was good. Got to hand it to the boy. Sorry, sucks to suck. That is factually correct. He also won a suspicious amount of coin flips, of course. He's got godly RNG, so there's that.
Tails.
There you go.
You get the delegate.
How many do we? When you're watching.
And then flip it over. Flip it over. Heads. Buttigieg. Heads. Buttigieg.
All right, so Buttigieg will get 3 delegates.
Democracy dies with a thunderous applause in the back rooms of Iowa pool halls. We thought there needed to be CIA interference. Turns out this is it. So, what would be perhaps a better way to look at this? What would be a better indication that someone is a more viable candidate, especially from the point of view of electability, because that's the only reason why people care about the Iowa caucus is what could be a better way to figure out electability than random number guy, RNG coin tosses, and rural areas getting an outsized amount of influence in this minor electoral college process that they have with a state delegate estimate that they get. What could be a better way to figure that out? Oh, wait, did you just say the popular vote, maybe? Well, wrong. Shut up. What are you, a radical leftist? What do you want, democracy? It seems like you hate democracy. Liberals are turning into those Republican guys, basically, that say, like, well, this is not a direct democracy. That'd be a tyranny of the majority, baby. Meanwhile, of course, those same libs are the same ones who were like, Hillary actually won the presidency because she won the popular vote. And this is not even a direct comparison because like having an electoral college style system in the way that state delegates are dished out in Iowa is really dumb, much smaller across the board. Electoral college is bad across the board, but you can work around it. You know where to go and campaign. If you know like Wisconsin is an important state, you got to go there. So there are ways to work around the electoral college, and it's definitely up to the campaign, regardless of how inappropriate the electoral college is. But in this circumstance, it's not a direct comparison because how do you campaign against this? What do you do?
And then flip it over. Flip it over. Heads. Buttigieg.
I mean, this is you can't campaign against so that was really weird. All of this stuff that was happening was really weird. And then the Sanders campaign immediately the night after revealed their results. They revealed 40% of their results, probably looking at favorable precincts to themselves, where they had a comfortable lead in delegates. They had a comfortable lead in the popular vote. Then the next day, they revealed 60% of their results. They worked all throughout the night. And then the IDP came out, the Iowa Democratic Party came out and said, you know what? Actually, we have 62% of the results that have been revealed. Now, my speculation leading up to this point was they're going to reveal numbers that are favorable to Pete. They're going to look at precincts that are favorable to Pete. They're going to try to reveal numbers that were favorable to Pete as best as possible. And guess what? I was, of course, right. And unfortunately, they did exactly that. And they showed that Pete had like a very narrow victory in state delegates. Hey, if you don't trust me, and I know a lot of people love to say conspiracy when it comes to leftists or when it comes to things that are not backed up by mainstream media. Well, all of the things that I'm saying are backed up by mainstream media. I know you guys care about institutional legitimacy more than anything else. So here it is. Here is your institutional legitimacy.
The initial preference in these precincts, you can see, was Sanders 24, Buttigieg 21, Warren 19, Biden 15. You can see Klobuchar 13. And you can see what happens. Remember, in every precinct, 15% the magic number. So let's show you what happened then. Again, for all these precincts, this is the reallocation. So watch. Remember those numbers? Now watch this. And there you go. Wow. So Sanders on the second allocation continues to lead much tighter. So how does Sanders lead in the state delegate equivalent? How does Buttigieg lead in the state delegate equivalent if he's not leading on the second allocation? It gets into, and I got to take a look here very closely, but my suspicion here, strong suspicion, would be what we've been talking about. These counties are weighted differently here.
So that's what I was talking about as far as the state delegate equivalents or state delegate estimations being like weighed totally differently in rural areas. That is what happened on top of everything else that I was mentioning. Still doesn't make sense because Sanders has a comfortable lead in the popular vote in the first round and in the second round of votes. And let's say that the state delegates are a little bit higher on Pete Buttigieg's side. Let's say he's winning by like the narrowest of margins, okay? The total delegates that they're going to get at convention are the same. They're either going to be the same or there's going to be one delegate difference. Like they're either going to be the same or there's going to be one delegate difference in between both of them. So why are they not like looking at the popular vote, instead looking at like random coin tosses and the SDE that they normally used to use, which is an antiquated way. So yesterday they released 62%. Then later on in the night, like 11 p.m. Eastern, they released 75%. And at this point, you're like, what the hell is going on? Why haven't they released 100%? Well, turns out they couldn't release 100%. They released more numbers today. Turns out the IDP reporting vote totals from Black Hawk County that are at odds with the Black Hawk County, the numbers that the Black Hawk County themselves have reported. Now, if you look at this here, you'll see Tom Steyer with 396 votes. And that's kind of weird. That doesn't track with the rest of Steyer's performance across Iowa. And who is that? Deval Patrick, who is polling at 0% around the country, whose first campaign event had exactly 2 people in his own home state. How the hell did he pick up 494 votes? What's going on here, folks? What's happening? And then Chris Schwartz from the Blackhawk County guy was like, I don't know what's going on with the Iowa Democratic Party and the slow trickle of results. I know for a fact that they've had the count from Blackhawk County for over 24 hours and will not clearly explain to anyone, not even me, as an elected official, what the process is for releasing our results. I do not understand why these complete results were not released yesterday, and the leadership of the Iowa Democratic Party will not tell me. As you can see, the numbers that they reported here have Sanders with 2,149 votes with 155 county delegates. Sanders' numbers here reported are 1,638. Buttigieg with 1,578 votes and 111 county delegates. 1,588. Buttigieg suspiciously got 10-point pickup. Sanders lost 600 votes almost. So that's really weird that happened. Steyer had 27 votes. Steyer here has 396. Deval Patrick got 0 votes, but Deval Patrick here has 494. What a weird situation from the Iowa Democratic Party. Turns out I'm not alone in my conspiracy, Andy. Obviously, if you don't trust me, you have to trust the New York Times, right? There's more issues in Walnut Grimes Grant. There are mistakes and there's like Deval Patrick realignments left and right. But here's the conspiracy theory from the New York Times' very own stat guy. If I made projections, and I do not, I would still hesitate to pull the trigger given my general lack of confidence in the results they're putting out here. All the issues I saw in that last update are fixed, but am I sure it's right at the moment? Can't say so. Wow. Now you have Nate Cohn, the literal main data guy for the New York Times, also being suspicious about the results. Maybe now, just maybe now, some of these neoliberals will finally come to terms with the fact that this was a disgusting rollout, completely broken, definitely did not favor Bernie Sanders, and I speculate was partially deliberate. Regardless, the outcome is the same. The outcome is they stripped this momentous victory from Bernie Sanders. They even stripped it briefly. I would say they even stripped it from Pete Buttigieg, because if they had just revealed the results and Pete Buttigieg got like a super close second place position, or if they were tied up in delegate numbers, Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg were tied up in delegate numbers, that's a gigantic victory for Pete. That is a gigantic victory for Pete. That didn't even happen, and normally I would be sympathetic to Pete, but I'm not, because he didn't care about any of that. He pulled a George W. Bush and did not wait for the Florida results to come back or the Supreme Court to decide on whether or not Florida results were going to change. He just went on a victory tour, just like George W. Bush did, and has been fundraising and has seen pickups in his New Hampshire polling as a consequence of his fundraising and as a consequence of the media covering this as though Pete won, as I was right.